Okay, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Apologies for the slightly late start there. Needed a reboot, but I am ready to go now. And as are my colleagues, Mr. Walter Schultze of the Network Architect channel and Mr. Eric Way of the News Coolum channel. Good afternoon if you're on the West Coast. Good evening if you're on Walter and my coast here in the East. And wherever you are, I hope it's not too hot. I'm sure it is where you are, Eric. Just a reminder that we are Coast-to-Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. If you're new to the stream, let us know down in the comments where you are and what you drive. And if you're catching us a day later here, a reminder we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all those interesting places where you can catch us on your commute or anywhere you choose to relax with some audio. So formalities out of the way. Let's jump into the news, I think, which we're a week late on a lot of this stuff. There was some interesting stuff today, but a lot of it broke last week, so we were on the wrong cadence for once. But charging partnerships is the big deal here. A charging partners party with actually one did break today. We had Mercedes-Benz partnering up with Starbucks. So they are looking at something like 100 locations, I believe, in your corner of the country, Eric, down I-5 and stretching up into Starbucks country up in Washington. Let's see. I'll just go through all of these, then we can kind of digest which ones are most interesting to us, and let us know in the comments which ones you'd prefer us to talk about. So Starbucks seeing other people, because they originally had the partnership with Volvo, which goes down from Washington all the way into Utah, but they'll be playing with Mercedes-Benz for the next year or two here. We had BP Pulse partnering with Simon Properties, who we'll get onto a little bit later as well, but they are with 75 locations, I believe it was, with Alpatronic hardware that BP Pulse has signed on for. And Simon Properties is one of the, if not the largest retail and the retail mall and premium outlet property owner in the United States. And then last but very much not least, we had Toyota joining IONNA, so the 8th member of the previously Super 7, and that's a lot of partnerships in 1 week. Who wants to jump in with their favorite? Walter, you led us off with the news of most of those. What are you feeling on the charging partner party?
Yeah, the Mercedes-Benz one caught my interest because I'm notoriously type A, and they had a cup in their press releases with a line going down it. I don't know if anyone saw the line. I counted the Starbucks. There was only 8 going down I-5. So I don't know if it's centered in California or if that was just an example, or if they're going to like dump all of them on the West Coast, or if there's just going to be 8 like those were actual locations. So I'm trying to line up where those underlying Starbucks are and see where these Alpatronic stations are going to be. But it is a good partnership because nothing's nicer than getting a cup of coffee while you're charging and having facilities available to you as well. Starbucks are well maintained and very popular, well lit, so there's good security. Normally they're interior, but the map that they showed as a teaser seemed to indicate that they were going to be designating road trip corridors. So more to come, but still very encouraging news, because as you mentioned, they're doing the Bucky Simon Mall for their Mercedes-Benz charging hub. And I guess these will be considered Mercedes-Benz charging hubs as well. And then they're also doing IONNA. So they're moving across multiple different fronts. So of the ones that were announced, even though this one was just today, that one has definitely piqued my interest the most.
Eric, how are you looking at it?
Well, I was going to say maybe those are just regional cups, Walter. So it's just that you can collect them all, right?
I would totally do that.
Yeah.
Brandon Flash actually collected cups from Starbucks, and so perhaps that's what they're doing.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I do agree that Starbucks is a great location. I've stopped at Starbucks a lot, and there's a charge point next to a Starbucks on I-5. There's also a Supercharger there, so I wouldn't be surprised that that's one of the sites that they target, right? Right off the freeway, clean bathrooms. You can get food too, and that's the thing that's nice about a lot of the Starbucks is it it got its kind of notoriety also as a lounge, right? And people have kind of moved away from that and stopped using it. But EV travelers actually appreciate that kind of service. So whether you're stopping for 5 minutes to grab a drink and use the bathroom and get back on the road, or you're stopping for 20 to 30 minutes to grab a snack and relax in the AC, Starbucks makes a perfect location for that. So, yeah, I mean, but I haven't dived too much into the Starbucks one. One thing I was going to, I actually feel like almost making apology to Toyota. Not quite there yet, but Toyota has been doing a lot of good work. The BZ4X, or they updated the charging speed on it, but now they're partnering with IONNA, but they didn't get enough credit either. They're also partnering with EVgo. So it's much, much smaller, to a much smaller extent than what GM is doing with EVgo. But Toyota is partnering with EVgo as well to help build out some additional charging stations. So, like, we're seeing a shift, a movement from Toyota that, I think they deserve to get some credit for, acknowledgement for.
So you don't think I should make the joke that the BZ4X here is just waiting for the other one who's charging at 10 kilowatts? I don't think that's what's happening.
Well, that's what I said, that updated charging curve. What was it? It now charges from empty to full in just over an hour.
Yeah. So not nearly as bad, right?
Yeah, pretty
also impressive. Interesting here. Like, I mean, it's just a bit of marketing stuff, but there's, you can see the IONNA thing there, and it kind of looks like a UFO. But that's, potentially, I don't think that's done by accident. I think they've left that little kind of, canopy style thing in there or used it as an opportunity to say, we're going to have canopies, we're going to have lighting, we're going to be this kind of all-inclusive brand. I think that's there for a reason.
Well, do you think, because we haven't really seen anything like that in North America, but in Europe they have those circular charging hubs, and so almost a carousel style. I'm not sure if that's maybe what IONNA is hinting at.
Well, I don't know. The only thing, it was when we looked at the one site last, which actually has a Starbucks by it, ironically, and this is this kind of spaghetti thing now. Everything is interconnected. All of these properties and everybody, EVgo partnering with Toyota, but also Toyota going to IONNA, Mercedes-Benz being part of IONNA, and then going off to Simon, Bucky's, Starbucks. All of this starts to come into that land grab that we've talked about a lot of times. About they need these spaces, they need property partners who are going to be able to roll them out quickly. But yeah, I think, they're going to potentially have some interesting kind of footprints here, because I don't think that first one, assuming it is the first one, but it's the only one we've seen in the last month or so over in Houston, and going into construction in the next, few weeks here at the start of August. If nothing else comes up as a potential hub, then that's going to be an interesting kind of footprint of a very small site footprint, but potentially with some quite interesting kind of architecture and maybe some innovative design to its canopies there. So I'm really interested to see. But this, these partnerships are really starting to get hard to follow, because there are so many now that are overlapping. Simon is one that we'll probably get onto a little bit, but using BP Pulse, and I think they will be the Alpatronics, as we said. But there are, just looking at the local mall next to me, it does look a lot like this. It's that kind of upscale, slightly more affluent area, retail center. But they have, the one near me has a 12-stall Supercharger V3. It has the old legacy 50 kilowatt EVgo kit, which you have to assume at some point will either be ripped out or upgraded. Maybe that will be one that gets taken over. And it has an Electrify America station, and they're big lots. I mean, don't get me wrong, these retail outlets in the malls have a lot of space, but it's just, there's so many potential stakeholders in there now. I wonder, who has the preferential agreement with Simon, or who has the kind of, the chance to get the most, useful part of the parking lot, if you like.
Well, and Walter, you did a recent video. I think it was one of the EVgo sites at a retail plaza, and we had a little bit of a chat there in the comments section, because these larger retail properties like Simon Properties, I think that they can support multiple charging providers. That's the thing, right? So they have no reason to be exclusive. And we have some Simon property in California that have EVgo, Electrify America, Tesla, and some other like non-branded chargers all in the same retail plaza. And if you're looking at a building that is, half a mile across, or a parking lot that's a half mile across or a mile across, you might want chargers near every entrance to that building, because you're not going to want to park on the northeast corner to go to the, the Starbucks on the southwest side, right? So these facilities can support multiple charging vendors.
And they can. I think one of the advantages of anchor malls is the availability of power, because apparently when you're selecting a site, you want to make sure that there's sufficient power in order to energize your station, and you're not going to have trenching or new poles put in or something like that would take years in order to get it delivered. So it is got an element of expediency to it for the CPO. Also, as you say, the gargantuan parking lot is also helpful in order to plop your charging station. I question whether it is in the best advantage of the customer, though, to back lot of an anchor mall, because those things do close, and there are some security concerns about those. They get dark at night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, if I'm going down the interstate trying to get home, do I want to stop at a strange city in an anchor mall that is unoccupied and no security, or do I want to go to a C-store somewhere and charge up? So I think there's a space for it. I'm not sure if road tripping is the best place to put a station at an anchor mall, though.
Well, and Walter, I was just going to say, you bring up another good point too. A lot of the stations that I've seen vandalized were vandalized because they were in the back poorly lit section of retail plazas, right? So we had a 6-charger EVgo site in Woodland, California, over by the mall, and literally just someone went through and cut every single one of the cables. And it's like, well, it's in a dark, poorly lit corner of this large mall. Makes sense. Like, security might come by once every 10, 15 minutes if you're lucky,
Wish I'd taken a picture of it, but I was at one of the premium outlets for Simon, and it was in the daytime. But I'm hoping this bloke is there at night, because it came through this fella on a 3-wheel kind of little trike thing. I'm pretty sure it was electric, and it was so Paul Blart Mall Cop that it was perfect. I really wish I'd got the footage, but that's the kind of guy you want zooming around at 2 a.m. as your dark outlet. You're probably more worried about him than you are the copper thief.
You need like Kevin Hart or whoever it was, and take out those cable cutters.
Yeah, got to have those people. All right, it's kind of this is all linked to what we'll get onto in the main topic here. So I think we're in a good segue to jump into the comments here. Make sure we say good afternoon and good evening to everybody. So Steve, greetings from Massachusetts. This is not me because it's a 2020 Kona. Can't watch live, but I'd like to see more level 2 chargers at supermarkets, Massachusetts, New Hampshire border area. Absolutely, the entire Route 2, I think it's Route 2 or Route 3, need to be electrified. That's a bugbear for many in the state, and New Hampshire is just way behind, so we hope to see a little more action there soon. Houston Huggins II. Yes. Good evening, everyone. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the current state of EV charging infrastructure. Also, hello, Walter, Kia EV6, Mercedes EQS. Nice electric garage. Congrats. Brian Ribby up in Minnesota. Some good road trip videos. I think the latest one is to Michigan, which I have to catch up with. So that's on my watch list for the end of this week.
It's beautiful country that he goes through. Great videos.
I miss Michigan, so I'm looking forward to hopefully catching up vicariously with that.
Yeah, and he hugs the northern portion of Lake Michigan up there.
Nice, very nice. Joining while I mow, but looking forward to listening to the show from my pocket. Thank you for joining us in your mowing capacity. Leonard over in Tulsa, Oklahoma. drivers of Model 3, welcome back. CCS retrofitted himself. That sounds like a video in and of itself. We'll have to get your details on that. For my part, I had a pretty great experience with CCS on road trip from Oklahoma to Virginia and back. Excellent, good to hear. I do generally hear things getting more reliable, but obviously we have moments and a whole summer ahead of us, so it'll be interesting to check out as we go through. Dennis Lyon, good evening, everyone. Cheers from Michigan, the Michigander. Happy to have you in the stream here. Tom Palmer, good evening from San Diego, driving the same old 2020 Bolt EV. We need Bolt EV crew all the time. We've got Eric, and we love to have you here. Thank you very much for joining. Andy Getch, hello from Mustang Mach-E driver in Fort Myers, Florida. Hello, thank you for joining us. Ariel Batista, hello from Jacksonville, Florida, driving an ID4, and wife has a Nissan Leaf. Loving to see these 2 or 3 car electric car garages. Good stuff. Stephen Reddish, sorry if I butchered that, from Seminole, Florida. Welcome. Stevenson Peter Jr., who I was with this weekend, just down in Greenwave Electric Vehicles. I'm Burke because here's Steve. So we enjoyed our trip down from Maine to New Hampshire and back, and it was a lot of driving, but definitely good fun. And Jay Dolnison, good evening. Thank you for joining the chat. We are cranking through here. I'm trying to get everybody, so bear with me, and thank you very much. Mark Fitzpatrick, Chatamo to CCS1 adapter is out from A to Z. Yep, Tom Malogney has a great video on that. It's pretty penny at $1,000 or so, but you can get 10% off with Tom's code. So if you are in a Leaf and you road trip that sucker a lot, that is one that you'll probably be eager to get your hands on. So welcome, Mark from Ohio, and with a Leaf, naturally. Anthony from Seattle, greetings. And let's see, we're almost through here. Belton family, hi from Indiana, Volvo C40. We are really coast-to-coast EVs today. There's lots of people in the middle as well. Thanks for joining us. James Rockhill loved his 2020 Bolt EV, but his 2023 Model Y is much better and more expensive. Yep, that is the way it goes. But congratulations on the upgrade. Tyler at the Average EV, another shout out for your excellent Equinox EV content. Lots of good stuff coming there, and Eric's always in the comments to give you some back and forth in conversation.
I can't wait to see the results of the 70 mile per hour test. I wasn't able to stay up, so.
No, I saw a notification, but I'm waiting for the video, so we're on the edge of our seats for that one. Thanks for joining us, Tyler. And yes, Starbucks is the ideal location for a lot of people. Too bad you live on the East Coast. Well, I would expect Starbucks will expand it pretty quickly. Let's see. Crazy Meat Postman, not sure he's ready to forgive Toyota yet. Toyota's more evil than VW, apparently, for a lot of people here. So we are, I think, through. Oh no, we've got Chase from Grid Connections. Welcome. And indeed, Chase is in the house. Bill B from Tampa, Florida. Alex, Dennis, just a couple more here. Thank you for bearing with me. And thank you everyone for joining. It's great to see you all here. Bolt EUV driver from North Carolina. Shout out to Walter. Love to take his road trip, Bolt on road trips and adventures. Lots of folks from Walter's neck of the woods. Big hot EV hotspot at the moment. Bashawn from Buffalo, New York in a 2024 Lyric. Fellow Lyric owner from Walter's Club there, in a different part of the world. And yes, $1,000. That is the price that you will pay for charging your Nissan Leaf and using the CCS network in the United States. Thank you, everybody, for your letting us know you're here. And we'll jump into the main topic now, which is DC fast charging. Overbuilt? Are we crazy? I think that's probably the general sentiment from some of us, but Eric, that's
it was the U is directed at me, right? Yeah.
I don't know. I was trying to find a line to agree with you, and I think I may have come up with a few, but I think let's set the context for it, because this was a couple of episodes back, and we got onto the topic. I almost did a short on it, but I couldn't quite get it out. But essentially, the context of the danger of overbuilding DC fast charging. Now, if anywhere has the potential for that, it would be where you are on the West Coast, California being the kind of home of US EV adoption for the moment, at least. Give us a little context about the background of the kind of concept and where we're coming at this from.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, a good thing Chase is here because I did go into detail on his Grid Connections podcast. So if you have a chance, go check that out. I was able to maybe elucidate my thoughts a little bit better. But it's important to know that I'm saying this future looking. Like, I don't think we're even close to being there in the present state. But as we can see from all of these partnerships, as we can see from all of the funding, both public and private, right, we're seeing a massive influx of money going into the charging infrastructure. My concern is, as EV owners, we're already in a sort of privileged position. Basically, most EV owners paid more than $50,000 for a car. And if you can afford a $50,000 car, you're in the upper crust of the financial, stratification of our country. It might not seem that way, but that really is the case when you look at what the average person makes and what the average person has the financial freedom to do. And it's one of the things that I think even GM kind of noted this. By the way, Mary Barra liked one of my comments on Facebook. Go figure. The thing is, the reason they're feeling such headwinds in the EV market is we still don't have a whole lot of affordable EV options, right? So even the Equinox, that's supposed to be GM's affordable EV, it's really not that much cheaper than the ID4 or the Hyundai Ioniq or any of these other vehicles. So we still have a barrier to entry to owning an EV. And the wealthier, more affluent people are the people who have the freedom to travel. And that's what I think a lot of people miss is most Americans do not travel long distances in their cars, at least not as regularly as I think a lot of people believe. So maybe on Christmas and Thanksgiving, but even then, most Americans have started to default back to flying because the roads themselves, whether you're in a gas car or an electric, are so oversaturated with cars, people, on the road drinking. It's just not where you want to be on those high travel days. And then, of course, weather is getting more erratic and everything else. So even on Thanksgiving and Christmas, we're not seeing as much travel on the roadways, right, as you would expect. And so the risk I see is assuming that electric vehicles need the same level of support with public charging as gas cars. And as batteries improve, as range increases, as what I call the subsequent charge range, right? So a Bolt EV, if you stop for 30 minutes, you get another 100 miles, right? If you stop in a Hyundai Ioniq for 30 minutes, you get another 250 miles, right? But that subsequent charge range is only going to go up and up and up, especially with newer batteries that can charge faster for longer. So that means that instead of we saw it with the Silverado EV crossing the country against the other pickup trucks, they literally made 9 charging stops, and that wasn't to go 2,400 miles, and that wasn't even the biggest battery Silverado EV. So you're going to drive 2,400 miles and only need 8 chargers, maybe. That's what would happen if you have a legitimate 400-mile EV with 250 to 300 miles between charging stops, which is really that sweet spot that I see for most Americans. So and the bigger concern that I have, and when I say things like overbuilt, is we're also not building our chargers in an equitable way. So CARB called Electrify America to the floor for this, and it's absolutely true. If you look at the numbers in California, they're supposed to be supporting disadvantaged communities. More than half of the counties that would be considered disadvantaged counties by income don't have a public charger at all. They don't have any public DC fast charging, let alone an Electrify America DC fast charger. All of Electrify America's DC fast chargers are concentrated in the disadvantaged communities that happen to align with highways and freeways. And even then, not all the highways, mostly just interstates. And so we see this massive build out from EVgo. Walter tracks it all the time on the Network Architect channel, where you're seeing 5, 6, 7 EVgo sites going live in a week. but they're all in cities, right? They're all in major metropolitan areas that have a bunch of other infrastructure already. And we're not seeing them out in the middle of nowhere where someone might have a 200 to 300 mile gap that they have to cross to get to the next town or the next county. And that's a problem. And so even if we do build 1 million chargers in California, if they're all in LA, San Diego, and San Francisco and Sacramento, what are the rest of us to do? And this is where I said maybe the infrastructure in California isn't as great. I'm going to have some updates on my channel, but not to get too sentimental, but I think EVgo literally saved my cat, because PG&E turned the power off and she had an emergency procedure. I needed to go to a vet, and literally EVgo was the only working charger. The Electrify America in Anderson, for those who know it, is down, completely down right now. So that leaves a 200-mile gap if you're trying to go from Electrify America to Electrify America on I-5 in California. That's just not. And then everybody who's fixated on it, I talked to a Bolt EV owner who waited 2 hours to access a charger, an Electrify America charger in Willows, California. And he didn't even realize that there was an EVgo charger across the freeway. But everybody's so fixated on Electrify America that that's all they see. And we're seeing it in all the forums now is, how do I cross through Northern California? All the chargers are down. Well, it's all the Electrify America chargers are down. The problem is the rest of the chargers are either slow or they're also down. But that there's this fixation on certain chargers and certain networks. So yeah, I just see, with the money that's being infused, I see a real concern about it not going where it needs to go. And then the other factor is, I think people forget, is Tesla is eventually going to be opening up their chargers, not to spoil a future discussion point. And a lot of Tesla superchargers, especially in rural areas or areas where Teslas aren't dominating the market like they are in California and certain coastal states, those superchargers are empty, especially during the week. You travel through middle America, and most of the time you have zero problem finding an open Tesla supercharger stall. And those chargers are also going to have to improve, go to 800 volts, likely improve the amount of power per stall. And once those are open to the public, we're literally doubling the public charging infrastructure overnight. And I just see, even in a surge capacity, that being able to support EV adoption moving forward for years and years into the future, assuming that we're getting a majority of the travel needs out of the way right now, because the majority of the people who are early adopters are more affluent and more likely to travel more frequently. So anyway, I'm done.
No, it's good context, and obviously that comes from the place that has started these build outs. It has a slightly different kind of geographical layout maybe than some of the rest of the country. But Walter, you can obviously take this where you want, but it'd be interesting to kind of, after having heard that from Eric and the kind of context that he's framed the discussion in, how that looks in your area, with the tracking you're doing nationwide as well, but certainly down in the southeast where a lot of these new networks are coming in and a lot of them are travel based. Do you see any risk of it being overbuilt where you are, or is it just filling the need and getting stuff in the ground that we have needed for years here?
In preparation for this conversation, I did some research and started pulling some numbers, which I'll dump here in just a second. It will only take a moment to do so. And really, there's two areas. There's the travel people going up and down interstates needing to refuel because they've depleted their battery and they need to continue on to a trip. And then there's the people who live in multi-tenant dwellings who don't have access to a charger at the place they live, who need to charge up on a routine basis. So there's two general populations that are occurring. And according to the National Renewable Energies Laboratory study, the 180,000 chargers that we'll need in the mid-adoption forecast in 2030, 65% of those chargers will be needed by people in multi-tenant dwellings. 65%. 14% will be needed for people going up and down interstates doing road trips. So 14% is the only thing we need. So when I was first prepping this, I was going to be the devil's advocate to Eric's proposition that we're overbuilt, and I'm like, damn, he's right again. Kudos, Eric. So my opinion is there's such a focus on road trip, and the reason there is because there's been backlash from bad press about road tripping. So we've been throwing tons of money, even in the press releases that were mentioned. The Starbucks Mercedes-Benz traced a road trip going down I-5. It wasn't talking about all the people in the multi-tenant dwellings, the underserved communities, the rural areas who are living without the ability to recharge their vehicle on a routine basis as a result of having access to electricity at home because they're living in something either that they're renting, like a rental house that they can't retrofit, or a apartment that doesn't have level 2 or even level 1 charging available to them. So they need DC fast chargers. And if those are unavailable, then they're stuck. But all this focus on road tripping and putting in large charging stations to make it easy for people to road trip in an EV, in my opinion, is getting to the point where we are right now overbuilt. Because I to pull into stations that have multiple stalls unoccupied, especially Tesla Superchargers along interstate corridors. And just to rattle through the numbers, of the 180,000 needed by 2030, we're currently at about 50,000, which includes Tesla and some restricted stations. That leaves a gap of 130,000 left to do. There's 2,000 days left, which would be 65 stations per day or 455 per week. And if you average an 8-stall station, that's 57 stations per week we would need to open in order to hit the mark of 180,000. But really, it's the 65% gap that we should be focusing on, who should be serving the people in the multi-tenant dwellings. The 14% of road trippers, that's easy. We could do that in a heartbeat. In fact, as Eric says, we're probably already there. What we need to be focusing on is providing charging services for the sea of people who are going to be needing chargers in my neck of the woods. Charlotte, North Carolina is very urbanized, and they keep putting up more and more apartments. Every time there's new construction, it's a multi-tenant dwelling of some form. And there's an Electrify America station in central Charlotte at a Walmart that has 10 stalls. 10 stalls ain't going to do it. We've got millions of people around here, probably half of which are going to be living in multi-tenant dwellings. And if you want those people to drive EVs, where are they going to charge them?
But are we putting the responsibility in the wrong place there? Because, maybe what's underbuilt in this case is the level 2 charging and these curbside options that we're talking about. I mean, if they're building these new residential buildings and there's multi-unit dwellings, why aren't there, from the ground up, not even if it's not, solar and different renewables focused, and why don't they have the level 2 plugs in there from the beginning? Because why would you throw that at a $1 million install, essentially, if you're talking about 10 charging stations not being enough, when you could maybe get 40, 50 level 2 plugs in there and cater to those people while they sleep?
Yeah, and it's a tough nut to crack, and that's where the National Renewable Energies Laboratory was saying that it needs to be DC fast charger backfill for the temporary, because the ability to retrofit all those multi-tenant buildings that are already in place is a regulatory nightmare. So according to their study, which was done in 2023, which is a little bit dated, not too much though, the number is 65%, but still the 14% of road trip, my personal opinion is, if we're not overbuilt yet, we're soon to be. And so anyway, the overbuilt discussion, in my opinion, if we're talking about road tripping being overbuilt, we're darn near there.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Walter, because you brought that up in a way that I wasn't really thinking about. But yeah, if I would agree with you, especially if you say, snap your fingers, the Tesla Superchargers are open to everyone. We're already borderline there, right? I can't think of very many routes that I couldn't drive in this country if I had access to the Superchargers with redundant options along the way.
Okay, let's see how this is resonating in the comments here. So Tom Palmer will not call you crazy, but driving from South Dakota to San Diego, that must be right. San Diego to Tucson on Interstate 8 is a charging desert. Plenty of Tesla superchargers, but I still don't have access. So that maybe speaks to the point of once we flick a switch here, and assuming they're 250s or new installations, then we should start to become closer to the overbuilt potential much sooner.
You know, and the one other point that I would add to that, though, Steve, is I think we also underestimate how long it's going to take to see the market penetration of EVs that would necessitate that level of infrastructure. Because we have 300 million gas-powered cars licensed for road use in the United States. If you're building 30 million EVs a year, you're still a decade away. Right, if you sell it, so like, and that's assuming that those gas cars leave the road. So before we even see a 50% market penetration in terms of ownership for EVs, we're looking still possibly decades from now.
Yeah, according to the National Renewable Energies Laboratory study, the mid-range is 33 million on the road by 2030. Low range is 30 million. The top of the range is 42 million. So as you say, there's a lot of wiggle room in there.
So we have Chase from Grid Connections. Seems like ways to go even with recent road trips that people have documented, like Out of Spec did in the Race to Vegas videos. Yeah, there's I think, you know, we'll hit a lot of these travel topics, and that's kind of the issue here is, you know, there are two very distinct populations that we need to serve, and this will come up with the 85% cap from Electrify America to alleviate congestion, you know, and how that different, you know, use case is really fueling that pilot that we'll get onto in a little bit here once I crack through the comments. Bill B will not be DC fast charging will not be overbuilt until there are more plugs than gas pumps. EVs are at a charging station much longer than gas cars, so we need a lot of dispensers. This is true in the past. I would, you know, cautiously just say that, you know, I think we may have been overbuilt in the past at times when we had like Bolt EVs and only, you know, maybe ID4s and Kona electrics on the road, that kind of 2019, 2020 point. Remember, like, there's different levels of overbuilt as well in terms of power. You know, Electrify America was way ahead of, you know, they built a lot of stuff from 2019, 2020 that was 350 kilowatts when only really the Taycan could take it. And, you know, those weren't, you know, that prevalent on the roads. So we've had a period where we have overbuilt in terms of power and things have kind of crept up. But when I see Ioniq 5s, even with the free plan at the moment, and that's attracting a lot of people, kind of flowing in, being there for 20 minutes, flowing out, you know, all this stuff, the throughput changing pretty quickly, that starts to become a different kind of kettle of fish, right? Because that's 3 Ioniq 5s potentially in the time it's taken to charge a BZ4X. Or so, you know, some of these maybe are down to fit and where they should be, but it's also, you can get a lot more cars charged with the same number of stalls once we start getting the power and the vehicles capable of using those stalls more efficiently.
Well, and Steve, that's why I like to focus a lot on the average charging speed, because right now, if you look at even our 150 kilowatt charging infrastructure, there's only a handful of EVs that can average 150 kilowatt from 0 to 80%. Like the EGMPs, the Porsches. I mean, yeah, sure, some big battery like the GMCs, things like that, but most EVs are only using barely a fraction of the actual throughput of the site power.
And I would also point out that if no one is taking road trips, and if every multi-tenant dwelling is somehow regulated into putting in level 2, we don't need any gas stations. 0 gas stations. It's in an EV future, which Norway is, you look at basically a decrease of convenience stores over time because everyone's charging at home. Who goes to a gas station anymore? Unless, you know, you need a pack of smokes or something like that.
Or blueberry pancakes. Some of these places have pancakes attached, you know. That's a callback to one of Walter's videos, which you should go and watch. Just find it on his channel. It'll be there. Leonard says, unpopular to say, but I think that some of Francis Energy's troubles are because of the Oklahoma market. Doesn't have enough traffic to justify their charges maintenance. I'm usually the only person there. Yeah, although, again, the record for them hasn't been great. I don't know what the redundancy and competition is like. I know some of the areas that there will be Electrify Americas, maybe less so EV Goes, but I don't know how much of... Well, we will get onto that at some point, but there is certainly a case of at some point, once bitten, twice shy, you're not going to go back there unless you really, really have to, and probably the reason that people have stayed loyal in commas for Electrify America is because they have plans, right? They can go back there and they will go back to get their free juice, but now we're starting to see some of these expire. It's more of a buyer's market. You know, you'll go wherever it's well priced, or where there's good facilities, where there's the right kind of amenities for your trip. So all of that stuff starts to factor in, I think, as we get out of the era of free charging. Ariel Batista says, not overbuilt, but we need more apartments, markets, and other locations with level 2, sorely lacking in level 2. Yeah, I think one of the, I mean, again, I don't know how much difference some of these solutions can make, but we did talk to Nathan from It's Electric. They've just got the go-ahead in Boston. They have pilots in Michigan, New York City. So a lot of these kind of level 2 solutions and curbside solutions are starting to get some traction. And then it just becomes a case of how many vehicles can you serve, I think, because, you know, to Eric's point, there's a lot of vehicles out there still to electrify. And even if you get a level 2 curbside charger outside an apartment block and it can serve, you know, 2-4 EVs overnight or through the day, you still have a lot of people to convert at that point. So level 2 is great where it needs to be, but we have to get a lot of it in to kind of replace the DC fast charging 4-stall, 8-stall station. Let's see. Mark says Francis Energy has invaded Ohio too. Yeah, they are invading a lot of places now because they're the top of the pack for NEVI funds. So there's 2 open in Ohio now, I think, in Cridersville and Byersville. So you're going to start seeing them a lot, although they are now using that Signet, SK Signet hardware, which is a lot more reliable than some of the stuff they previously used, I understand. So hopefully, yeah, we're not doing very well here, sorry. Crazy Postman says, I'm trying to eat dinner. Do we have to keep saying Francis vomit? Yeah, the vomiting days are behind them, but I don't know how much we can do. We'll have to wait and see. They've got the money now, or it's coming, so we'll have to see if the latest equipment does the business or not. And Jed says, should you build DC fast chargers where the EVs are now, or build them in disadvantaged communities where they're not, but you want to encourage?
Yeah, in my neck of the woods, you asked me about that. The Deep South is notoriously low adoption of EVs. And I made a trip across the Deep South where Leonard went. He went from Oklahoma into Virginia, I'm assuming down 40, and then to Interstate 81. And that was basically untraversable in a non-Tesla just a little while ago. In fact, there's a famous out-of-spec review video where Kyle Connor, who's arguably the most hardened EV traveler on the planet, almost went bankrupt with his battery. The only thing that saved him was a single unit at a dealership in, I think it was Mississippi or Alabama, somewhere in there. So it was untraversable before. And so and the reason it's untraversable is because there's not a lot of demand. So if you're an EV owner from the East Coast and you're trying to go to Texas and you have to traverse the Deep South, it's slim pickings. There's very little out there. So road tripping through areas where there's low EV adoption is a difficult thing to solve. And I don't know what the answer is. So yes, there's low supply of DC fast chargers there, but there's also low demand from the local population. Counter that where there's urban multi-tenant dwelling people, where there's, you know, a lot of EVs and too few plugs. It's different scenarios through different areas of the country, but the Deep South is definitely one that is similar to that what was being referred to in the comments in the Pacific Northwest. Too few chargers in order to successfully make road trips.
And I think this is something too, though, that as a country we can make this discussion that these chargers are an economic draw. And one of the problems with these disadvantaged communities is they've lost a lot of their income, right, as a result of not having any sort of industries or commercial ventures that draw people from outside of the community in. So not just are they on rural routes, usually are on connecting routes in between interstates, but a lot of these disadvantaged communities would also see a disproportionate benefit from the infusion of new revenue from basically travelers who are taking the road less traveled, literally.
Yeah, and that's one that you don't really get with the dealer installations, right? Although they have certainly been useful to me in various places in rural Pennsylvania and travels around, but not so much, that's not gonna, no one really gets any money except whatever pittance they make from the electricity sales there, right? Because you're really not usually near to a local business. Maybe if you're lucky there's a gas station there, but that's not bringing people into the community, stimulating the local economy, getting the tourist attractions fired up, that kind of thing. Heading north of the border quickly, because I missed a couple of salutations from Saint-Jacques, New Brunswick. Welcome, Photogravity. And I had another Canadian friend somewhere here down. Where were you? Sorry, there's... oh, there we go. Mark Berenger. I hope I pronounced that okay. Just joined from Newcastle, Ontario. I think the networks suffer from under maintenance rather than overbuilt. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about reliability in the past. My feeling is that's getting solved very quickly here. There's still going to be a lot of old hardware out there that's going to cause some problems, and some sites that are really, problematic, but there's so much new stuff going in, and I feel like we are very, very close to cresting that wave, and moving on to more of an abundant and kind of dumping the ones that don't perform and moving on to ones that do. But north of the border, I mean, I've seen the comparison I would make there is that there's always been a lot of options when I go north, and it's a little bit kind of contrasting, because when you hit the north of the US, you're by definition in very remote areas that are northern and kind of not as many people live there. But then you flip over into Canada and then you're in a Montreal, a Toronto, Vancouver. There's a lot of places that, maybe that's a little different with Washington and Seattle being right over the border. But a lot of the places in my side of the country, you're going from very rare, not a lot of people in the area to suddenly very major metropolitan areas. But it's pretty well stacked up there. And the cross-country route, the Trans-Canada Highway, seems to be relatively well served. Maybe you guys can kind of chime in on that, but I think the problem I have seen is it's older. It was built a little bit more quickly than a lot of the parts of the States, and those seem to be, just needing to be either upgraded or have more stalls put in. So maybe the same kind of situation north of the border as we see in some parts of the States, where stuff's been put in, it just isn't reliable enough yet, or there are eventually going to be too few charges once people pass through.
Well, and you also have the California problem, where we have multiple interstate routes that were built out before anywhere else in the rest of the country, but it's all 50 kilowatt, 60 kilowatt charging infrastructure. So
let's see. So Chase brings up an interesting point on the not being able to charge at home. Started to notice where people who can't charge at home will rush to a supercharger for off-peak and charge as low as 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Yeah, I've been looking at pricing a little bit more recently, and Walter's point about EVgo being actually quite cheap once you get into the nitty-gritty of their pricing, time of use, and everything else. It's pretty reasonable once you get into the membership plans and off-peak, but off-peak, of course, means 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So you have to be willing to suck up that kind of wee hours of the morning charge, or be on a schedule that allows that. But it is interesting. There's some DC fast charging is cheaper here in the Northeast, at least, than home charging, just by virtue of the way the hours work out, the rates being slightly higher or not having a special EV rate. That's more of I think a problem for us, the kind of early wave of adopters. I think that stuff will start to be fleshed out, and hopefully some incentives and initiatives will come along as you get the people who are in those brackets and needing to get more affordable charging. But again, the point there is, does it need to be DC fast charging, or should we be looking at more options for people to be able to charge these things, while they sleep, while they do other activities, while they visit the store? Maybe it's DC fast charging, but it's at that 50 kilowatt kind of level, talking about the Simon properties. And maybe this brings us on to partnerships in the right place at the right time. But those kind of Simon properties, if we're looking at stimulating those stores that are in the mall or the outlets, I often find I'm not charging long enough to go and visit those stores. It's way too quick. It's a fast food stop for sure. It's a Starbucks stop, which is why that Mercedes-Benz kind of partnership makes sense, and the Volvo partnership makes sense, because that 15 to 20 minutes is a good match with my vehicle, at least. But for stopping to shop, not a chance. I may not even go into the mall, because it's, by the time you walk in, go to the restroom, maybe you'll do that, but you're not going to have time to use the retail facilities. Let's see, what else have we got here? One of the things I wanted to look at was, can overbuilding, if we get there, stoke EV adoption? Because it's not an accident that things like NEVI have focused on building out the travel corridors, right? The various requirements of that program are that you have to be fully built out if you want to access the funds for all these places that we're talking about, towns away from the interstates, communities. They have to have a certain amount of these built in disadvantaged communities, but the priority from the first round of funding has been that you need to fill these travel corridors, alternative fuel corridors, every 50 miles, having a DC fast charger. So that's been a strategic part. You saw obviously Pilot Flying J, investing, and they're only going to build these travel corridors because that's where their facilities are. Maybe they'll happen across, a community where there's it kind of dovetails with disadvantaged or environmental justice communities, but for the most part, it's going to have to be an intentional build to put DC fast charging where these communities need it. What do you think about, taking a strategy of, you need to build it out travel routes first because people need to see that they can travel, and then once you've done that, and overbuilding as a strategic incentive to spike EV adoption, because people, even if they're not realistic about their travel plans, maybe they travel 1/4 as much as they think they do, but they want that idea of being able to take that great American road trip to buy an EV before they take the plunge.
So, I at one point in time thought that contingency, right, is one of the things that was preventing Americans in particular from buying EVs. And that speaks to your point, like, what if I need to go 1,000 miles in a day, right? Or 1,000 miles in 5 hours, as I think some people in gas cars seem to claim to do. But there's this idea that the infrastructure has to be there first, right, before I'll buy an EV, before I'll take that plunge. But none of the data supports that, right? Because right now, who's the chart? Yes, they've done the most up to this point, but who's the electric vehicle automaker who's struggling the most right now? It's Tesla, and the one with the best public charging infrastructure, right? They're the ones who are seeing their numbers slide the most. As much as we keep seeing this push for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, they've chronically been a failed product line. Toyota is the only one who's been able to effectively sell plug-in hybrids in any sort of volume that actually matters, right? Like GM nearly went bankrupt because of the Volt, right? Not because they weren't selling EVs or plug-in vehicles. You're talking about a company that literally failed in 2 different markets because their plug-in hybrid strategy just didn't take, right? And so what we're seeing, I feel like, is almost the opposite, is that there's almost no interconnection in what I'm seeing between the travel corridors being built out and the uptake of electric vehicles. The number one thing that's affecting the uptake of electric vehicles is the upfront price of the car itself. If we bring that price down, you'll promote EV adoption. Like if you cut $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 off the sticker price of every EV currently on the market, you double, triple, quadruple the number of EV sales overnight, and I don't think the infrastructure would have very little. And this goes back to the National Renewable Energy League, their data that Walter was citing, right? If you have 90% of your charging occurring at home or work, that means, yes, there is a small percentage of the population that you're not touching who are in multi-unit dwellings, things like that, who can't access charging at work and home. But when you look at that as a percentage of the potential EV buying population, it's very small. So you have 70% of the market that's open to you, and you're still only selling, you only have what percentage of the market share at this point? A couple of percent, right? Yet you have 70% of your potential market could plug in and charge at home if they wanted to. So what's stopping them? It's the cost of the car, right? So I don't think that there's a direct connection or one that we can really correlate strongly between the build out of public charging infrastructure and the uptake and sales of electric vehicles.
Well, as I had hoped with the topics here, we have complete disagreement with you in the comments. So, Anthony thinks visibly abundant infrastructure will induce demand for more EVs, and Chase is on his wavelength with that, maybe because they're in the same area with Pacific Northwest Air, but agreed, about to say the same thing, and because we resemble this remark. Everyone on this stream is EV nerds. We already have EVs. To get the remaining majority, we'll likely need to overbuild for a while. So there's a couple of counterpoints. Walter, what do you think?
Yeah, I would echo that. I was at lunch today, and a colleague asked me about an EV because I had pulled up and I had transported some gear, and he saw it, and he's like, "Was that an EV? Because my Volvo doesn't look like an EV." And I said, "Yes, it's an EV." And one of the first things out of his mouth was, "What do you do on a road trip when you can't find somewhere to charge?" That was like one of the top of the things. So, right or wrong, it's a part of the psyche of the non-EV population. And I think there was a sufficient bad press, either specifically engineered in order to have EV FUD or whatever, but there's this bad press that is being countered by a push to install EV chargers for traveling corridors in order to dispel that myth with real hardware in the ground. So I think that's where that's coming from. And it also, as a result, will create enough infrastructure to future-proof the travel corridors for actual use as EV adoption increases in the future. We sell 15 million cars in the United States each year. EVs are somewhere around 10% of that now, and the uptick seems to be continuing to increase. So, if we're at 33 million by 2030, we'll need DC fast chargers on travel corridors, and it'll be nice if we're a little bit overbuilt and that's future-proofed. And Eric one time mentioned that the Tesla Supercharger network very easily could have been a part of the Tesla marketing budget, because really that is what it was designed for, to dispel this myth that you can't take your EV wherever you want to go. And they've basically achieved that, mission accomplished. So I would agree that there's non-substantiated FUD built into the psyche of the non-EV population that is in the process of being dispelled by these efforts. But us as EV enthusiasts are inheriting a very heavy build into travel corridors, which may or may not be unnecessary, but it sure is nice to have. I'm going on road trips both this weekend and next weekend, and both time I'll be going to many different smorgasbord charging stations just to explore and see what's out there. Circle K, several Pilot Flying J, a couple of EVgo stations, maybe a Tesla Supercharger if Murray says okay. I don't know. We're kind of close to that one. One thing I do want to mention, though, there's an app that's been around for a while called Gas Buddy, which is helping to track gas prices in an area. And one thing about the National Renewable Energy Laboratory study, they said 65 for multi-tenant dwelling people needing DC fast chargers in 2030, 14% for long distance travelers. But there's another number, is 21% of the DC fast chargers will be needed by rideshare. And it seems as though every time I come across a charger that has a very low price, it's slammed by rideshare people. And God forbid it should be free. If there's a free charger out there, there's a ton of rideshare people sitting on that thing. Does anyone know, is there like a Gas Buddy like app that rideshare people are using in order to isolate where these low price chargers are? Because if there are, I'd love to know what that app is. And I don't know what it is, but it sure seems to be a pattern that I've seen anecdotally in my travels.
I think you'll get the scuttlebutt on the rideshare communities there. They're definitely gonna. Well, aside from the fact that I think some of them have deals with some of the providers, you definitely will certainly free. You can find very easily on PlugShare and ChargePoint apps, but I don't think it would take long for that to get out that those are free, because we have an old Shell recharge down at Logan Airport, which is just constantly. I don't even try it anymore. It's a 50 kilowatts, so I don't know how you would be using that. There is a Starbucks next to it. Speaking to the partnership, exactly. Yeah, maybe it'll have Albatronics in there soon. But it's just one of those where I think that word gets out, and if you know those stations, they are a bit of a disaster, and it's kind of worrying actually. I don't know if it'll stay this way, but one of the new Nevi stations that just went live in Rhode Island, they previously had Park and Ride with CPE 250s, which were free, which was, that was, people were going to use that and whatever, they can go away and do that. But I'm not sure how people are going to. I'm worried that these 320 kilowatt ChargePoint Express Plus units they just put in for Nevi are going to be people camping on them up to 99, 100%, because if they keep them free, it's pretty close to Providence. It's not a massive state, but it's big enough that there's rideshare there. There's people commuting up and down I-95, and some free juice goes a long way in these parts. So it will be interesting to see if that stays free. I can't imagine after people, just let the cat out of the bag. So I'm sure there's going to be a long line down there tomorrow when I try it. But it is one of those that is kind of starting to worry me that these places need to charge. Now we get the other end of the spectrum with Walters kind of monitoring the pricing at places in New York for Pilot Flying J, and now I think Castleton on Hudson's up to 86 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's just, there's ends of this, but it needs to be cheaper in order to serve. Again, we get back to disadvantaged communities and people who need to just charge their vehicle, just want to get this thing up, and if it's going to be more than gas, it's not going to sell the vehicle.
Well, and that's that one point too, though, is you talk about infrastructure promoting EV adoption, but it can't just be there, right? I mean, I know part of it could be FUD and whatnot as well, but at the same time, even if you point to infrastructure that's in place, that infrastructure has to be working, it has to be reliable, and it has to be affordable to use. And it's that Dunning-Kruger effect for a lot of gas car owners where they don't even know the right question to ask. So they might be asking, well, where do you charge it? Maybe it's just curiosity, but they don't know all of the follow-up questions that you need to ask other than just, is there a charger in the ground? Because it could be terrible, right? And so...
one last piece of the topic here, which we've touched on, but the intersection with Tesla's public expansion. Now, I mean, if you asked people this time last year, we were going to be in the Holy Land at this point, land of milk and honey, everything was going to be fine. We are nearing, some people, we've got Fords with accessing the Supercharger network. I'm very happy with their adapters. We have Rivians. I've heard less of them using it, but still, that's a party that has got access to them. Walter, you've been reporting a little bit on GM's staggered rollout with the Hummer EV first. Maybe you could give us an update on that, and then we can get into what role Tesla's eventual public opening here will have on this kind of overbuilt topic.
In the short term, I think there's going to be a ton of chaos just because of the charge port being in the wrong location for the majority of these cars. I know with my Cadillac Lyriq, it's in the driver's side front quarter panel. And in order to get close to a level 3 dispenser, I have to use my cameras and inch up dangerously close. And I'm sure other people are as well. And it's a big car. More than one person is going to accidentally press the accelerator at the wrong time and clip those things. So I think in the short term, it's definitely going to be chaotic. But as far as the GM adoption of Tesla Supercharger access, there's clear indications that it's very soon, but not Chevy or Cadillac. Unfortunately, it looks like they're going to be allowing the Hummers to go first. And I don't know if that's because the Hummer EV actually came out first. I mean, if you look at it, the Bolt was really the first EV out there, that should be the one that should be going first. It's the original gangster of the General Motors EV lineup. But it looks like the Hummer, and the reason I say so is there are recordings of Hummers successfully charging at Tesla superchargers that are not test sites. These are just general population Hummer owners, and they are successfully charging at Tesla superchargers tonight. So it's just a matter of an announcement and the Tesla app getting updated, and then Hummers will be able to use it. Then, assumedly after that, we're going to see the Chevrolet and the Cadillacs released.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, and really the Bolt EV should have been the easiest one, right? Because there's no ISO 15118. It literally, it would just be accessing the same way that you would access a Magic Dock.
Yeah, a programmer would spend like 15 minutes and knock that out.
Yeah, and maybe that's the reason they aren't doing it, because even some of the GMC Hummer EV owners who are reporting access are still spoofing their vehicle in the Tesla app as a Rivian, because apparently what I can see from looking at the Tesla app myself is that the app itself hasn't been updated. So if you load in a GMC Hummer EV as your vehicle and you look at the map, the only thing you see open to you is Magic Dock locations. But clearly they're charging on non-Magic Dock locations, but they're having to spoof in the Tesla app that they're a Rivian just so they can see the chargers.
Did it myself. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, but it worked. Yeah, it worked for the GMCs. So yeah.
At the same time as we get that news, we're getting pictures of Hyundai models with the native J3400 port starting to use superchargers. So this is all brewing, right? I mean, I think we expected to be a little bit further ahead in terms of vehicles that could access via the adapter. And maybe that has something to do with the supercharger team being let go on relatively short notice, but I don't think long term this is going to make as much of a difference as we thought, But the underlying thing here is that once we get vehicles that can access the supercharger network, we start to distribute a lot of this load that is currently, again, we've talked about Electrify America constantly, and Tyler, if he's still here, had a great tip, and I think you've talked about this, Eric, before, about knowing that other providers exist on road trip. Your road trip tips should include go and look at an EVgo, go and look at a charge point, have PlugShare or just those apps to see when the Electrify America station's full with 5 or 6 cars lined up, if one of those could go and, even if it's a lot slower in terms of power, the time you won't be queuing is going to save you, that line and that time on the road trip. But this potentially takes a lot of people away, and there's, as we've talked about, in the middle of the country and in areas where it's not the Las Vegas to California kind of routes, that kind of thing, where Teslas are 10 a penny. A lot of these stalls, the supercharger stalls, are sitting empty. And even if they don't expand as fast as we thought they were going to, even if they have a kind of slower roll of V4 coming out and 800 volts, whatever, most of these vehicles are going to be happy to go to a Tesla supercharger, even with the oddity of the port location and the potential to, piss a few people off. There's going to be some of that, but it happens at Electrify America stations now where people park in weird places or leave it charging for a long time, whatever else. Tesla's going to potentially take up some of that slack. Rivian opening the Adventure Network. It's quite a lot of locations out there, starting to kind of gone sleeper because nobody really can access them. But once that happens within the next, 5 months, really now, that opens up a whole bunch of 6-stall, 9-stall, 12-stall in some instances locations. So that starts to take some of that pressure off the networks that have been under strain. That's why I kind of use that. I think that it's undeniable that there are places that are under strain. But they're just waiting for some of that pressure.
I think your audio is slipping.
Nope. Okay. Maybe it's cue to shut up.
No, you're back.
No, it's
no, I think it's I just see that kind of as a pressure valve to kind of release some of the strain that has been thrown at Electrify America by free charging plans, by just being the face of public charging for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I mentioned that Electrify America site in Anderson is Electrify America is still in a lot of the parts of the country, and even in California, they have corridors where one site going down literally leaves their customer base in shambles, not knowing where to charge, where to go, what to do. So just like you said, it's even not just pressure, it's that redundancy and resiliency that comes from, oh, I've got a 8-stall Supercharger over here. Oh, I've got a 6-stall Rivian, Adventure Network charger over there in the middle of nowhere. And so if this 4-stall Electrify America goes down, I still have options as an EV owner, and that's important.
Let's see. I'm going to run back to the comments here. I've probably missed a bunch, so apologies for that. Let's see. Todd Holter says FUD is still there. Change is hard for a lot of people. Yeah, there are folks who are going to be anti it no matter what, but there's a big soft middle where I think a lot of these things won't play a difference. Eric's point of upfront pricing, we need cheaper EVs certainly, but I do agree with Anthony and Chase that just the visibility, certainly of seeing the kind of facility you see behind Walter there, and whenever you're stopping for your gas car to be, even if the gas car isn't fueled up, you just see a very similar comparable charging station along a route that you're taking in your gas vehicle. I think there's something to be said for that in terms of at least flicking a few switches, even if it's not someone who's quite ready to buy just yet. Let's see. Yeah, electrified light vehicles helps me out there. I think I may have said something that was without the native port. This is Ioniq 5s and Kia EV6 coming with the native J3400 port, which is for EGMP vehicles. Yeah.
And do we know, was that port exclusive, or was it in addition to a CCS port?
It was exclusive as far as we could see. It was under camo, but it looked exactly the same as at least from what we could see under the camouflage. It was the same location. They weren't changing, anything around for that. It was
still passenger side rear.
Yep, still happening. But hey, at least we'll be able to curbside charge without getting hit in Boston. Let's see, what else do we have? Andy Getch says rural area utilities along interstates often use CB 250s or Shell recharge 200 amp units. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of mismatch that we're talking about, right? Those things potentially are what should be at least an option in the malls and the places where you want to go for an hour to sit down for a meal maybe, and you want the high power 400 kilowatt shiny new thing in the areas where you're going to be on the road quickly because there's nothing there. Whether the power's there or not is another matter. So that could be the case in some of these scenarios. What else do we have? Passmore's Playhouse asks, why is Tesla throttling charging speeds? I'm not sure if that's related to something you guys have seen. I know EGMP vehicles do, but that's our own bug to bear.
Well, yeah, and I wonder that's that sort of disconnect with the superchargers. They're great chargers, but they are designed for Tesla vehicles, and so maximum current way more than CCS EVs can accept, but lower voltage than a lot of CCS EVs. So,
and Dennis asks, is anyone comfortable running charge levels down to single-digit percentages yet? Yet, I think that's what I like to do if possible, although it's less of a issue with the EGMP. Maybe it's more for the live stream here. I know most of us will play with those kind of percentages down that low.
I get turtle mode in my Volvo if I get too low, and it's damn annoying.
Okay, so you just don't want to run the low power, but everything else
yeah works. Once you get about, I think it's 8%, the turtle shows up, and then after that it becomes increasingly belligerent.
I have to work really hard to get mine into turtle mode. It's I'm more worried that it won't remind me than anything else. One last area we wanted to jump into was what role will these partnerships play? Just bringing it back full scale and to the various players that we talked about at the beginning. I don't really know. I mean, I think we've just got a lot of these on the board at this point. My only question is, will we kind of balloon out and then need to pull back a little bit? Are these partners that are just signing contracts with everyone? The kind of Simon maybe is its own special case because they have the space to do this and the power, as we touched upon. But a Starbucks who's signing up with Volvo for some routes and Mercedes-Benz for others, do they want to be continuing to do that? Will they start to sign up with others? Do you see this kind of potentially having people pull out of or pull back their investment a little bit in the IONNA kind of initiative? Because well, how many pies can you have your fingers in? How many investments can you put into fast charging under your own umbrella, under partnerships, and then under something that's for a lot of other automakers?
Yeah, and in the case of Starbucks, I think they have to be getting something monetarily out of this arrangement, because I don't know about the Starbucks in your areas. The Starbucks in my areas are not looking for more customers to show up to them. Most of the time, there's a 25-minute drive-through line wrapped around the building, and there's people inside. There's plenty of customers. And do they really want Mercedes customers and other EVs sitting in their parking lot, leaving their garbage around, coming in to use their restrooms? It kind of seems like a one-sided deal. So I'm thinking that if you're a national brand and you have a real estate portfolio, that puts you in a bargaining position, and there has to be some kind of monetary advantage to them allowing the DC fast chargers. I don't think it's a mutually beneficial. Sure, go ahead and put your chargers in our ground, and thanks, that's nice. We'll get some more customers from it. And we'll sell a few more donuts or something. I don't think that's it. I think there's some real cash going on here.
Yeah, and I was going to say maybe if they had blueberry pancakes, it would be a little bit more incentive
with blueberry pancake syrup, man.
Yeah, and the blueberry pancakes.
These are the wrong partnerships. They should be partnering with the Network Architect channel to start hyping up their foodstuffs. This is the way to go.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding the question exactly, Steve. But I mean, in terms of, I have a limited bandwidth for these partnerships because I see them as being so fluid, and we're seeing a lot of it because it's not just a partnership between the network and the location. A lot of it is partnerships between the CPO and hardware providers, right? And so right now you have, so ChargePoint, they build their charging equipment in-house, right? But now we've seen Mercedes sort of go from having an ostensible partnership with ChargePoint to now, choosing Alpitronic. What prompted that? And then you have same thing with Walmart, right? What happened to Walmart? They started building with ChargePoint equipment, and now we haven't heard anything. I don't know, Walter, if you've heard anything about any movement with Walmart at all.
None, and their website hasn't been updated either.
Yeah, and then of course, like I said, EVgo with Delta, that seems pretty solid. But then BP Pulse, that's another weird one where it was like, are they doing FreeWire? Are they doing Tritium? Like, they seem to have the touch of death, right? They bought V4 superchargers, and now they're doing Alpitronic. So I feel like we're just going to be watching like flies buzzing around. And then in terms of the money, it's never been clear to me, right? Because I've heard a lot of pushback about the GM Energy Pilot Flying J EVgo. Oh, GM's not actually putting any money into it. Well, that doesn't seem right to me based on what we're seeing. But we also don't know what Pilot Flying J is putting into it. Is it literally just, hey, we'll give you the space and then the rest is on you, right? And then we see the NEVI funding coming in with that as well. So like it's not clear how much of a commitment there even is to IONNA from these different partnerships. Like, is it just, oh, I'm Toyota, I'm going to pay to put my brand on there? It's almost like buying an ad, right, in a newspaper or something. You're just paying for your name, your car's EV brand to be posted up on a fancy logo showing, these charging stations. So I'd like to see a little bit more transparency into the nitty gritty between like what are these automakers actually bringing to the table for these charging provider programs? And then, like you said, Walter, if you're a company like McDonald's is a real estate company, right? They own property. That's their actual business, and then they rent to the franchises. They're one of the ones that would be a key partner for charging providers, and so far I haven't seen anything official in that direction either. So I'd be curious what's going on behind the scenes with some of these contracts. But it's just too much, too fast, with too many different players to really be able to track what's going on effectively.
Yeah, because these things come and go, right? I mean, we saw it first with Electrify America, kind of as I think Chase here is focusing more on the side of the discounted charging plans and the OEM partnerships, but the Electrify America started with Walmart. That's the kind of classic joke of it, around the back of a Walmart parking lot, but at the same time that gave them nationwide reach, right? Where is the station going to be as you travel through Iowa, South Dakota? These are all coming to me for a very specific reason because I've just mapped them out. These are places that are all Walmarts for the most part. But that, talking about the Walmart initiative now, that's their own initiative because they've kind of pulled back from the Electrify America side, and Bank of America was another weird one that they're still rolling those out. But who is paying for what in that scenario? You have to feel like it must have been mostly Electrify America and VW by extension, because what the heck does Bank of America get out of someone pulling into their charger at either 9 p.m. and just loitering in their lot, or trying to use their restroom at midday because there's nowhere else to go?
Steve, I don't have a Bank of America account, but if they put a charger in, maybe I'll get one.
Well, I think you should, and then you can use that toilet. I think we're running to the end here, but these partnerships have kind of been coming thick and fast this week, and I don't expect we'll see a slowdown because everybody seems to be trying to get their piece of the pie, blueberry pie, hopefully. Thank you both for joining. I don't think we have any comments left or questions that I need to run to, but thank you for everybody for sticking with us through the almost hour and a half. Appreciate you all for joining us for the discussion, your contributions. I think we have to figure out the topic for the next one, and I do have some guests lined up for later in August and into September, so expect a few more special appearances once we get people out of summer holidays. But until then, thanks so much for joining us. If you're catching us after the replay, or on the replay or the audio, that will be up Thursday around lunchtime, and we'll see you in the next one in 2 weeks' time. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.